Honestly, like if you put one of those things on, you kind of feel like you have to go on anything possible.
I know.
So it's like, it's also, it has like counter effect on it, but
there's nothing scarier than putting on a Gath helmet.
It's like pulling a 10-6 from out of the house.
I was about to say two things you never want to buy. No. You know, if you're an average surfer, a Gath helmet and a 10-6 Rhino Chaser. You know,
now an impact vest.
Holding 10-6s under your arm, just like it's just like you get adrenaline just holding it. You're just like, wow, the wave you have to ride to surf this board is huge.
It's terrifying.
So, Ashton, you took over as Stab editor, what, like 4 or 5 years ago now, has it been?
5 years ago.
5 years ago.
I left Surfer.
First, I think we have to mention, if you're comfortable, how you left Surfer magazine, because it's pretty ballsy and awesome. And no one knows about this, really. Are you comfortable with that?
100%.
Because they don't exist anymore anyway. It's a ghost magazine.
Yeah. I'd been at Surfer for like 2 years. I took that job with like the most like optimistic, like so excited to show up and be like, oh, like we get to make this shit rad, like Surfer magazine.
Yeah.
And surfing at the time was right next door. So it was like the sickest environment. I was showing up with like, I think Taylor and Brendan were over at Surfing, and then Todd Prodanovich and Grant Ellis and Jim Newitt were at Surfer. And walked into this space where like all these guys I looked up to were making a magazine under the umbrella of the most corporate fucking dog shit like management ever.
Yeah.
And you're showing up like as a surfer next to like late model Porsches and guys in bad leather jackets showing up to talk about like the future of media being like blanketed advertising across like multimedia channels and shit. And yeah, it was just not, it was the opposite of what I imagine Severson had in mind, like opening up that space in San Clemente. And I was there for a few years, like, you know, just sort of like stubbornly trying to do what I wanted to do. And it was a nightmare. And so at the very end, Surfing was closed. They like sort of branched. They brought a bunch of the guys from Surfing over to Surfer and tried to like consolidate everybody. And you could just see how quickly it was going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And I'd made a few like sort of attempts at like bringing in new ideas and things that I felt like they needed to do, even just as far as like digitizing their archive and things like that, just becoming a modern company.
Yeah.
And I was just over it. I came back from Hawaii after this weird incident with, that I don't really need to talk about, but like I came back from Hawaii where I felt like the leadership had just been like so cowardly and not stood up for the people that were there doing their job. And I got into a weird argument about it. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. And I left. And I wrote a long email to the publisher of like, this is like the best magazine in the world and it should be led with like backbone. And yeah, it didn't win me any friends.
Good.
And so I left, and yeah, like a month later, Sam McIntosh like ran in me and asked me what I was doing, and we got coffee, and he's like, I'm buying Stab back. Do you want to run it? And I was like, fuck. I'm so glad that I sent that email and left.
Well, the thing is, like, it's been so cool because we've known each other from back in the Mollusk days in New York, like 2007, 2008. And you also went to my alma mater, also the New School. We're both alums from there, creative writing program.
Yep.
And it was so cool to see, though, the direction that you've taken, Stab, in the sense that it feels like you've pulled back the curtain on a lot of things. You know, you're talking about stuff that I think all kids and all like surfers kind of dream about or talked about or thought about. You know, everything from salaries to how sponsorship works to all these things. Like, and it's really refreshing to see.
Well, I can't take credit for a lot of the creative, I mean, most of the creative output from Stab, though I'm proud to like have a say in the way that we do things. And I think that we've helped shift the tone and this like sort of attitude of Stab in the last 5 years. But the people, I mean, the crew that we have from Sam McIntosh and Tom Bird and Aaron Carrera, like our publishers, to me, Sam McIntosh is like a visionary when it comes to creative projects within surfing. Like there's very few people that have had their hands in so many like iconic creative projects. And he's a weapon at picking talented people. And I don't say that because of me. I say that because when I look around at our crew now, it's the best people that ever worked at Surfing Magazine. It's Taylor Paul and Brendan Buckley, Mikey Sternmella. And then as from a film standpoint, I feel like we have the best young talent as far as filmmakers go, with Sam Moody, who's right next to me.
Yeah.
And Will Stiles, who's our principal editor and filmer for most of our projects, and now Blake Michelle. And it's become this like really cool environment. I always imagined making a magazine being like doing like Saturday Night Live, or like, you know, or running like the New Yorker, where you have all these like crazy different like voices coming in and trying to make something that feels uniform. And that's what I feel like Stab's become. It's like a really cool platform for like anybody who wants to make a surf film or a surf related project. They know to come to us and like bring the idea, pitch it.
How has it been going to the subscriber base on the digital platform? Because that's been, you know, I think it's definitely a ballsy move, for a media company to do it. But it seems like kind of obvious that it's probably the only way to really survive and have your own voice and not be just a dictaphone or a microphone for the industry.
Totally. And I think that there's a little bit of like untangling from people's ideas about subscriptions, because people have a Netflix subscription or a Spotify subscription, and then they might have a New Yorker subscription or a New York Times subscription. And we wanted to sort of be some combination of those two things, where like we might have an app that you can click on that has all of our video projects, or then also like to have like a sort of platform and a space for really, really quality journalism. And so that we can actually invest time and energy into that stuff, because that stuff is never what makes money.
Now you can do trips like this.
And then you get to be able to do real projects with real surfers, regardless of, you know, brand support sometimes, but also sometimes the brands what's been cool is similar to the way that the Surfers Journal has their model, where there's like, you know, their advertisers, they know they're supporting the magazine. We now have really, really solid brand partners that want to be a part of Stab Premium. And, you know, even the brands that we worked with before it was around Vans and Monster, with Stab High and with the Pickup and all these different properties, like they want to invest in products and shouldn't say product. They want to make content for a engaged audience who's willing to pay for the stuff that they want to see. It just has to be really good quality. And so it leaves it up to us to sort of live up to the expectations. But yeah, this year one, we've had like very, very little drop off from the initial burst of subscribers a year ago that bought annual subscriptions. And we've seen growth month after month of people usually just breaking down and wanting to watch everything, you know?
I bought my mom a subscription for Christmas.
Oh, you are a good son.
I don't got one, but my mom's got one.
Thanks, Paul. we owe Mary a lifetime subscription.
I use hers.
Yeah.
I mean, how is it navigating the surf industry then with that? Because to me, like, it seems like you're doing things. We kind of talked about this a little bit. Like, some of the stuff you're doing is definitely like you're kind of feeding the younger generation their vegetables, and 100%. You're trying to make it in a appetizing way.
That's the only way that these groms are getting it nowadays. Like, they don't get to experience it firsthand anymore, so they got social media outlets, or like whatever media outlets is the way to get through, it seems.
Absolutely.
Or at least the start of it.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I think surfers now, you know, and I can say like Simon and these guys, like kids from the East Coast, that they, you know, for them, it's like they know that they've got an outlet with Stab for what they want to make. And so they can come to us with creative pitches for projects and know that if it's something that's worthwhile, that we'll support it, because we know that our audience wants to see it. And then as far as like the feeding kids vegetables, like for me, that's like all I've ever wanted to do, is like to figure out how to make the surf culture that I feel like should be like cataloged and archived and documented and like thoroughly like done reverent historical like capturing and making that feel young and relevant. And to me, the person who's done that for us is Nate Fletcher. Like, being able to have Nate's basically a Stab employee at this point. And so having Nate as both like a sage, like sort of resource to like sense check whatever my sense of surf history is, and then someone to just drop knowledge constantly in a way where you just have to listen to it. There's no way you can like dismiss like Nate Fletcher making a definitive statement about surfing. It's like, this is how it is. And I feel like surfing has needed those figures to like step up to the plate. And I'm really, really, really proud of Nate for doing what is really uncomfortable for him, which is like standing in front of a camera and talking, because he had to, you know, watch Herbie do that his whole life. And, you know, nobody ever wants to become their dad, but his dad's Herbie Fletcher. He doesn't have a choice.
Will you ever be able to get him to say the thrill is back?
100, I'm sure. 100%.
For our listeners and youngins who may not know, like that's what Herbie used to do. And he had like that longboard movie in the 80s that came back and he's like, the thrill is back, you know?
And it was.
And he brought back basically longboarding almost single-handedly, I would say, more so than even Joel. You know, probably Herbie and Nat Young would probably be the ones to really credit a lot of that.
Yeah, Herbie, Nat, and Donald.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
But with Nate, I just feel like Nate's so like understated in the position that he has inherited, you know, like he might be Herbie Fletcher's son, but he's also been present and around for the most radical moments of the past 30 years of surfing, whether it was boat trips with Andy and Archie and those guys in the 90s, early Chopu events, and like really like putting a stamp on that wave as part of that crew. Big waves in like 2008, 2009, right when everyone started dying because they were going too big before there was inflation vests. And then moving through to like coaching the next generation of kids into big waves for the last 10 years as he's sort of like, you know, had kids and decided that he can't like go whip into every like code red Chopu swell. It's like not an easy, like, you know, landscape to navigate for someone like Nate. And he's done it. Like he's the best dad. He's a really, really amazing workhorse of a like creative person. And he's like, you know, Harry Bryant's like knocking on his door to borrow guns in the morning. And he's like coaching him into paddling out at Himalayas for the first time and getting as much satisfaction from like seeing a wave that Harry caught on his board that I think he would from catching a wave. Like he's just psyched to see it like get, you know, that energy go forward.
I feel like, and this is not a slight at him, but he's like the Forrest Gump of surfing in some ways. And not he's much smarter, of course, you know, and articulate, 100%. But I'm just saying like he's been there at all these key points throughout surf history over the last 30, 40 years. He's been there and had an eye view and also participated in it.
Or if he wasn't, his mom or his dad or his aunt or his
grandparents
pioneered so much in this surfing game.
Isn't it crazy?
From airs to track pads, like
the whole surf
Hoffman
industry.
fabrics.
Until the mid 90s, every single surf brand owed everything that they ever made to Hoffman Fabrics, letting them use their mills and buy their fabrics, like to a brand. Until Gotcha came along and made their own prints, like that was Hoffman.
Damn.
And it's like. But on top of that, like you've done like, you know, the electric acid surfboard test, you know, which is like getting people to try other boards. And now we see a lot of professional surfers riding all these different boards, you know, and without having to be prompted to.
Yeah, that all stems back to River Street, man. That was like, I basically felt like that film is like a cinematic version of my experience of moving to New York and walking through the quiver of that shop when they first started getting, you know, Steve Liss's and, you know, Malcolm Campbell's boards from the Bonzers and stuff. I'd never seen those boards grow up in Florida. And so for me, it was like an education just getting my hands on those boards. So to be able to take a surfer that's never like really seen any of that equipment and have them figure it out and make sense of it and like wrap their heads around it and then rip on it harder than most people have ever ridden those boards. It's like my dream. And then the surfers that have wanted to do it have made it a lot easier. And especially, I mean, with Dane and Steph, like those two for the first two projects was like I couldn't have like dreamed up having those like that's been like for sure like that and the Andy Irons movie I feel like been like my career highlight projects as far as like I want to make a film, how do I figure out how to do it, and then having that be the end result, because that the first acid test was the first surf movie I ever made.
Gosh, it was
with this gentleman over here, wherever Sam is. That was Sam's in my first long form project. And since then, that was like the validation. They were like, oh, we can make surf films. And so like Stab Premium, all that stuff came from us figuring out how to make those movies.
That's amazing.
And people being like, that was the only thing that people talked about. We could write 50 gossip stories or like, you know, sponsorship changes or whatever. And it was just like flash in the pan. But we made the acid test with Dane. And really, I should say that Stab in the Dark before I was there, the first Stab in the Dark with Julian and then with Dane, I think cemented, like it gave people this idea of Stab as being like high production film work, which I mean, they started with the first photo shoot with Taj doing the helicopter stuff. So they've been doing it forever, but it's just like, it's 2020 style now.
I want to see Ball with an electric acid, but at Pipe riding all crazy fucking boards.
Let's do it.
You know, take out
That
like
would be
crazy
rode-
old stuff
I
too.
rode 6'6" Alex Lowe.